Alrighty guys, welcome back. This is chapter 2 of the multiple apps workflow for ZBrush and Cinema 4D and Bodypaint, texturing and painting. Alright, so here we have Testa, and what we're going to first want to do is we're going to want to put her into a pose that's conducive to painting. I like to paint in the T pose, but honestly you can pretty much paint her at this point in any pose you want, depending upon what you need to paint and what areas of the body you need to access. So to set her back to the T pose, what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and delete the motion off of her. I also went back in and I added an extra frame of animation to her face so that I would have her neutral pose. And in order to do that, all I had to do was go all the way back to before I baked her body and her face together, and just offset the MDD deformer animation. In here you've got your start and your end keys, and what you can do is you can just set a frame offset. So if you set that frame offset to 1, what'll happen is at the beginning of your animation you'll have one frame that'll just be her standard static face prior to the animation actually starting for the face. Alright, so yeah, with that extra 1 frame of animation available to you, you'll get that static frame, which will allow you to have a good jump off point for both the facial animation when you get ready to cut it in, say, After Effects or Premiere Pro, and you'll also have a good jump off point for any texturing or any other type of weighting things that you need to do. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and reset this animation to the beginning, and as you can see we've got her neutral pose, her neutral face pose. We'll also reset the bind pose by either clicking on the weight tag and resetting the bind pose, or by using the method that we talked about in the other tutorial, in the Soften Mod tutorial, where we can just reset the pose. So we'll reset her bind pose, and that'll basically put her in her T-pose state right at the origin. Great. So now we're ready to paint. So in order to paint in Cinema 4D, it's pretty simple. We just need to change our layout to a layout conducive to painting, one of our body paint layouts. In my particular case, I have a few layouts available to me. I'm going to go ahead and use the BP Edit User defined. It's just a slightly modified body paint layout that I created, and we're greeted with the body paint interface. It's pretty much the exact same as Cinema 4D. It's just that we have a few tools on our palette that were hidden from us. Alright, so we've got our materials editor, and this is just basically like the Cinema 4D materials. It's just the view is changed. We can easily use some of these options here, like small icons, medium icons, and the layer manager. We could switch it back to, like, say, material list or material, and lo and behold, we basically got it back to the way that we're used to. However, in body paint, I do like to use the layers method of seeing my materials, because it allows you to see your channels. Alright, so basically if we select our character in the manager here, and we go to objects, which is basically our object manager, just condensed here into like a list, and over to the side here, and we've got our attributes here as well, and then we've got some extra panels available to us. We've got our painting layers here. We've got UV mapping. We've got the ability to access some brushes so that we can paint, and we've got a bunch of swatches, so we can add colors from a color palette. All right. So basically, if we go to our materials and let's say select her face, basically what Bodypaint allows you to do, is it allows you to paint onto texture maps. Alright, so by having a JPEG piped in here into our texture, we've basically added a texture map manually that we can already paint on. All we have to do is just click on this little X here, and basically what Bodypaint does is kind of smart. It kind of realizes that you don't want all the materials loaded into memory. Having all these materials loaded into memory automatically when Cinema 4D opens will kind of bog down your system. So what it does is it just basically has all the materials shut off. And if we go into our paintbrush, we kind of can't really paint. See, if we switch to 3D paint mode and we try to paint, we're going to get this big stop sign saying that we can't paint. You'll also notice Bodypaint changes the look of the viewport when you go into paint mode. So if we enable the skin face material and load it up, one, the material pops here into our viewport, or into our 2D layer panel here, and two, we're actually able to paint on that material here in the material manager. We could turn off the luminance channel temporarily so we can get a better idea of what our material looks like without our luminance, and we can basically zoom in, and we can actually, using the right bracket key, kind of similar to Photoshop, we can increase the size of our brush. The left bracket key will shrink the size of our brush. And these are the keys that are above your enter key on your keyboard, and we can just basically just paint whatever we want to paint. If we go ahead and select a color in our colors palette here, let's just go with a obtrusive red here. So go ahead and bring down our green and our blue channel and just pick a nice red. We are painting in 3 dimensions here, which is the power of Bodypaint, is the ability to be able to paint on our model directly. And we can also paint in our 2D view too if we want. So the Bodypaint gives us the ability to be able to kind of manipulate and work with both. As you can see, this texture is actually it's got like a nice little copyright tag there from whoever created this material for the DAZ community. Alright, but we know this material is basically not our own. This is a material that we got from DAZ. But as you can see, you've got that stop sign for the other materials. We haven't turned those on yet. Alright. So, here's the interesting thing about Cinema 4D and the way it works with materials. In our object manager, we can see that we have a bunch of materials here connected to our character. And basically, what we begin to notice here is these 3 materials actually happen to be using the same texture. If we go here, they're all using Rye-Kiera I01. And if we were to go into our Windows Explorer here, and I'm going to move it over, and we're going to go into Testa, and we were to go into her texture directory, we can see that if we go ahead and open up the eyes texture, here's the basic eye texture, and actually this texture is utilizing a concept called sort of a multi-tile workflow, but it's using it in a pretty interesting way. Instead of actually using multiple tiles like Mudbox, ZBrush, or Maya or 3ds Max would do. It's actually layering all the textures onto one UV space, and then it's basically using Cinema 4D's very interesting texturing capability to basically break the materials out. And this is why I kind of sort of love Cinema 4D, because it's a little bit, once you get used to it, I mean, this is the first 3D program I used in a major way, so I was forced to kind of get used to it right off the bat. I just fell in love with it, and every other system kind of weird to me. But we basically got 3 different materials. They're all referring to the same texture map, but they're all applied to different polygons, and we're able to do that in Cinema 4D because we have this ability to provide selections. If we go back into a Cinema 4D layout, like say my standard hair tool, and we go back into modeling mode, which is going to put us back into our basic viewport look that we're used to. Go ahead and turn on the luminous channel for her face. We'll see that we have these polygon selections. Now, of course, we're already used to the polygon selections. We've used them for a number of different things. But what happens is we can actually drag a material, and to illustrate this, we'll actually create a new object here. Let's create a basic sphere. Alright, and we'll center it in the screen by hitting S, and we'll just drag this out and scale it down a little bit. And we basically have this sphere. We want to create 2 new materials. Alright, and one is just going to be this obnoxious purple, and the other one's going to be white. Alright, so we drag the white material onto the sphere, and it's pretty much taking up all the polygons. We'll set the sphere to editable so we get a UV map. And yeah, we basically have a material that is taking up all the polygons. Now, say you want to punch some eyes into this sphere. Alright, so we're going to go into face mode, and we're just going to select maybe this polygon, these polygons here and here. And in Cinema 4D, you can drag this red material right onto polygons that you selected, and it'll automatically create a selection tag for you. Or we could have created that selection tag manually by clicking on the Set Polygon Selection button, and then we could have simply, in our material tag, after the fact, just drag the selection right here into the selection. So now we've got this sphere that has that specific material only applied to those polygons. The same concept goes for Testa. Daz has set up a number of polygon selections automatically on export, and it's automatically set the texture maps to those particular selections. There are some materials in here, obviously, like we go ahead and delete, and we go ahead and remove all our unused materials. That'll get rid of that red face that we used to do some of our cutting previously. The cornea, for instance, doesn't have a map associated with it at all. It did, but we got rid of it because we didn't need it. We could do that one procedurally in Cinema 4D. Now, that particular object is basically a set of polygons that's just over top of the eye, and it's just a transparent refractive material that just adds some more definition to the eye and adds some interesting reflection to the eye. and that's procedurally generated, but it's applied only to that specific cornea selection tag. Alright, so go back into Bodypaint user edit. That's the basic idea. Now, of course, while this is all awesome and everything, it doesn't quite work in a multiple apps workflow. Fact of the matter is, in most other apps, we have a multi-tile workflow where if we want to get high definition into specific objects, we can't just create materials and create multiple textures and bridge them out like that. Instead, what we have to do is we have to create a situation where we use multiple UV tiles. We basically offset the object in UV space. Right now we basically have one UV tile in UV space, and if we go ahead and click on a material and show the UV mesh, okay, and we just we click on her actual mesh itself, we can see that all our UVs are laid out on one tile. They're all over top of each other. Now normally this would be an issue, but once again in Cinema 4D we have our materials broken out in such a way that each material is being applied to specific polygon selections. They can all be laid out like this on top of each other, and it'll all work fine. If we select a particular material, say the skin foot, and enable the skin foot here in our painting library, and all our viewport commands work the same here. Right click, or the alt middle mouse button pan, and the right for zoom. The orbit obviously doesn't have any effect in here, but yeah, we can click on that particular material. If it's loaded into Bodypaint, we can click in that material and we can actually see, you know, what maps are applied to it. Then of course we can paint on it. Okay, so that's pretty simple. But let's say we want to make this work for a multiple apps workflow method. In order to do that, we're going to need to break out different sections of our body into multiple tiles. Now, here in Cinema 4D, we can do that by utilizing our polygon selections here. The polygon selections are the same thing as UV polygon selections. It's a little interesting and kind of confusing at first, but basically Bodypaint's UV polygon selections and the polygon selections for the basic Cinema 4D modeling is exactly the same. So if we select the feet here in polygon mode, if we switch to texture mode in Bodypaint, we can see that we've got our UV laid out feet, and as you can see, Daz has given us an amazing UV layout. If we want to break these feet into their own texture map so that we can use them, you know, in a workflow that's going to give us, you know, multiple tile texture maps automatically in ZBrush or Mudbox. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to offset these. So we can just basically transform them by one whole block. And basically that just moves them in one UV block over. So basically these are in the second UV tile area. Alright. Now once we do that, of course we have to change our actual material itself to reflect the fact that, you know, the foot is now offset by one whole UV tile. So basically U is basically the texture space is X basically. So if we go ahead and just move the offset by 100% like so, then we're basically letting Cinema 4D know that our texture is one whole tile over. Alright, we could do the same thing for the Y if we wanted to move the tile one Y over so that we had a tile, say, up here. Now, of course, Cinema 4D's UV manager and texture editor basically doesn't really give us a grid here. Of tiles. Oh. Oh, it might be able to. If we turn on some of these options. We'll have to see how that works when we actually do a true tiled workflow. But the great thing is, now that skin foot is now that we've offset it like this, we can still see it as a tile here, even though it's offset compared to the other tiles. We can see it in this space, and we can see what everything looks like and how everything is laid out. These are the feet right here. And so we're kind of good to go. So that's kind of how you would do multiple tiles. It's all confusing right now. I'm just basically giving a breakdown of Bodypaint here. Once we get into ZBrush and actually really paint our model, you'll begin to see what I'm really talking about. Alrighty. So let's say we also want to start from the beginning. Let's say we don't want any of Daz's textures at all. The UV maps are nice. Maybe we want to keep those. Maybe we don't. If we didn't want to keep anything, what we could do is we go back to a layout more conducive for this, like the basic Cinema 4D layout, or one of our custom layouts. We could actually go and really delete all the materials and the UV map off of the model. And we could keep our polygon selections if we wanted to. They would help. I honestly wouldn't go and delete everything. In fact, you know, I might even keep the UV mesh because it could be very useful. Depending upon how much changes you've done to your model, though, you may have a situation like if you added wings to the model, or added a tail or something like that, you may have a situation where, yeah, you need to actually, you know, add more polygons to the UV texture. You might need to actually redo your UVs. So if we go ahead and click on our model, and we go ahead and create a new material. We need a baseline material on the figure, and that particular material, go ahead and move this to the front here. I like my materials to be in the front, right before the selection tags. I just like them to be in my face right there. If we go ahead and give this a particular mapping, any mapping other than UV mapping. So, you know, just a projection, basic projection like flat. We can go ahead and actually generate UVW coordinates from that. And no, we won't include the sub objects. And now this material has been set to UVW mapping, and we have a UVW tag, which basically includes all the polygons in our new model. So this is actually going to include the eyes as well, those new eye polygons, as well as the new mouse sock polygons that we created on the mouse sock. Now we can go into Bodypaint, and we can see our projection right here. We see we've got a flat projection. Flat projection is basically a 2D projection a slice of the character, basically. And basically the polygons are just overlapping each other. You can kind of see them. They're kind of you can see the back polygons are kind of overlapped with the front polygons. And basically, if we were to paint this right now, we would have a texture that basically would have the front and the back would have the exact same texture. Alright, so what we want to do is actually want to use our selection tags. So if we were modeling a character from scratch, we basically have these selection tags, and we'd be able to select different areas of our mesh, like the feet. And if we go into texture mode, we can see that we have all those feet selected, even the polygons that are back behind. And what we can do is we can go into UVW mapping, and we can go ahead and basically create a projection that we can use to map these feet. So if we were to use something like, say, another flat projection, we can see that we've got the feet flatly laid out here in our texture space. We can then go ahead and relax the UVs out, and what will happen is it'll try to flatten our feet based on some internal parameters, based on this algorithm. In this particular case, because of the unique and organic nature of our feet, with all those toes and all these weird curvatures and stuff like that, we would actually have to go and we would have to do a different method. If we go ahead and go back to our layout, back to one of our Cinema 4D layouts, and we actually go ahead and turn off the clothes here, and just hide them. We can leave them in the object browser. That's fine. And then switch back to Bodypaint. What we can actually do is we can actually help the program out. We can define a seam using edge mode, and using the left bracket key I can go ahead and shrink the size of the live selection, and we can define a seam where we want to cut around. Basically, we're defining an area. Turn off soft selection. Defining an area here where Cinema 4D is going to try to cut a flattened projection of our foot. All right. So we could say we wanted to try to cut there. We've already got the polygon selected in this mode, in our texture mode, and in our edge mode we want to compare and contrast here. Basically, this is where it ends right here, so if we just take a mental note of that, Okay, so basically we just need to select this extra vertex, so we kind of have like a line that goes all the way up here. So, and so basically what we're telling it to do is it's going to flatten this out into like a sheet of paper that we can paint on, like a wrapping paper. If you were to wrap, say, a present, you basically want to wrap this this sheet of skin around that present. This present in this particular case being her foot. And to be fair, we also kind of want to select some polygons here as well, and then we'll just use Control to deselect the stray ones. And there we go. And then we go back into this mode, back into texture mode, so we can see our texture polygons, and we can see them laid out here in our 2D texture view. We can go to UV mapping, we can go to projection. We can set this to either a flat or a frontal projection. Frontal projection is going to give us a frontal view of our feet based on our camera, based on what we can see in our projection view here. So that's a great way to lay out your polygons as well prior to actually relaxing them. And then if we go ahead and apply relax, it's going to relax now based on the edge that we cut. So if we go ahead and select just these, we can see that along this edge it basically, you can see that it kind of sort of basically cut like right around here is basically that edge. It cut and created a seam there, and it did the same thing here. So this is the edge right here, and so that gives us a little bit more control. We could actually select those polygons now, go back into texture mode, and we could hit the E key to go into our move tool, and then we can actually move our polygons around, rearrange them. We can use our rectangular select tool, select just these. We could use T to scale these up, and we can basically give these more texture space. This block here defines our texture space, and depending upon what our texture size is, I like to use a 4K texture, so that's 4,000 pixels. 4,096 pixels this way, 4,096 pixels this way. And so we've got 4,096 pixels of resolution on our model that we can paint into each one of these polygons. Now bear in mind, you know, we've got that much resolution, but as we can see, these polygons here, these large ones, are going to get a lot more of that. So this particular polygon is probably going to get like 50 to 100 by 100 pixels of resolution of fine detail when we paint this in Cinema 4D or in Photoshop, whereas these polygons are going to get like, you know, 10, 20 pixels, 20 by 20 pixels, square pixels of resolution. We can also see that we've also got some overlap here as well, and that's just because, I mean, this is a really complicated object. I'm going through this kind of fast, but you would really want to spend a lot of time actually really cutting the foot out. I probably would split the toes out into separate UV islands. So basically, a UV island is basically, yeah, this right here. This is one UV island. This is actually 1 foot. If we were to select this whole entire, if we were just marquee select all of this, this is literally 1 foot, and I grabbed a few of the toenails. This is basically 1 foot, and this is basically the other foot, and they're separated by this vast gray space, so that's why they're called islands. Alright, so basically I would select each foot separately, and I probably would select just the core of the foot, maybe just the heel, the ankle, and probably, you know, the bottom and just this main part. I would bridge that out into UV island, and then I would actually create a UV island for each toe and select those separately, and I would use my hide tools, my different polygon hiding selection tools and different things like that to basically hide different parts of the foot so that I could access different areas. I would separate the toenails into separate islands as well. Each toenail would have its own island, and everything would be good. And this is if you want to create your own texture map and you want to have your own specific layout and detail. There are considerably easier ways and considerably better tools than Bodypaint to actually lay out UVs. We're going to discuss one such tool in ZBrush that creates an amazing layout very, very fast. And then we can come back in Bodypaint and actually go ahead and multi-tile out that layout so that we actually have a really nice looking layout that maximizes our UV space. Because ZBrush is basically going to give us a texture map that's going to be the whole entire body unwrapped. It's going to look amazing, but it's all going to be on one texture map, which means the whole entire body is only going to get 4K pixels. We don't want that. We may want our face to obviously have more freckle detail, a special mole that has like a lot of detail. We might want the chest area to have, you know, much more detail in specific regions. We might want the nails to have specific, you know, close-in detail. And I mean, depending upon what we're developing the model for, you know, this one might be developed for film. We might need a heck of a lot of detail. And we want multiple tiles. We want to basically be able to take those into, like, say, Mari, and we basically want to have 4K, 8K textures. In Mari, we want to paint extreme detail into our textures. We might also want that same extreme detail in our displacement maps. You know, and we can't do that with just one map. There's just too many polygons in this model to be able to get that kind of detail into one map. Alright, so yeah, that's the basics of UVs. These tools used in conjunction with some of our other packages will actually allow us to get our UVs pretty quick, and we can basically generate our own UVs, and we don't have to completely rely on DAZ. Bear in mind, however, revert to saved, and yes, I want to lose all the changes I made to various textures, and yes, I want to lose all those changes as well. And so we're back to Testa in her basic state, and we go to our materials, and we go ahead and enable skin torso, for instance, which would be her chest and body areas. And you can see we have a lot of detail in the ear, and I mean, this texture map is basically breaking out the whole entire body into just a map of its own. Just pretty awesome. But what we can do is, as I was saying at the beginning of this tutorial, we can obviously break this up as well. We can come in and we can select, and we're not getting any selections right now, and that's probably because those selections are ones that were related to, like, say, the eyes, and they're gone because we split the model up. But let's see. Okay, so this should work we go into our texture mode, okay, so we got the body. So yeah, we can just make selections of all the polygons we want. We just move them over to another tile and separate these out. And Daz has already got an amazing layout, so might as well just use it. Alrighty, so that's it for this. In the next tutorial, we're going to talk about exporting and importing into ZBrush. We're going to take advantage of the Daz workflow. We're basically going to be able to bring in our current texture that we already have from Daz, and we're going to be able to actually paint on it and add more detail to it. And then we'll also discuss how we can just completely forego this texture entirely if we want to, and we can actually paint in reference images onto our model and texture from those. Alrighty, so I'll see you guys in the next chapter.